The Moon, Earth's oldest companion, our only natural satellite, our nightlight. Humanity has had an intimate relationship with the Moon for centuries. It's been used to help tell us when to plant and harvest crops, it's been used to help navigate, and it's been used for spiritual communication and connection. But there was a term coined back in 1979 that really ruffled people's feathers: the supermoon. So what is it about the term supermoon that just seems to get underneath people's skin? To find out, I asked the question to the community. I put a post up in a forum on my X, which was formerly Twitter, as well as my YouTube community. And I got some responses. I'm not going to say it's an overwhelming demographic. However, the responses I got in, I've analysed, and I'm going to extrapolate those findings out. However, before we get on to answer the question of why do we seem to hate the supermoon, we need to learn a little bit about the moon first. A bit of foundational knowledge. How does a supermoon occur? What's its orbital characteristics and its phases? Basically, everything to do with astronomical observations and celestial bodies up in space operate on things called orbits. You may already be aware of this, but it's worth reiterating. An orbit is the apparent path a celestial body or thing takes through space around a parent body. The orbit is the path things like planets, moons, meteors, stars. It's what they follow as they go around their business out in space. That's all an orbit is. It's a gravitational bind to another object. It's falling too fast to hit its parent body. That's an orbit. It's falling with style, to quote a famous toy astronaut. To give an example, Earth's orbit is why we have things like the equinoxes and the solstices. It's why we have the seasons throughout the year, why winter is colder than summer and summer is warmer than winter. Earth orbits around the sun. This is nothing new. Earth orbits around the sun in what we call the heliocentric model. Now that was put first forward by a man called Mikołaj Kopernik, otherwise known as Nicholas Copernicus. Of course, that means the moon orbits around Earth. We know this as well. A thing to note though about orbits, they are practically never circular. They're never perfectly circle. They are ellipses. And discovering that all orbits are elliptical was actually the work of Johannes Kepler. It's actually his first law of planetary motion. Why is that important? If you looked at an ellipsis, an elliptical orbit around whatever, so if you looked at Moon's orbit around Earth and you notice this ellipsis, what you will actually see is that one part of the ellipsis, one part of the elliptical orbit, you've got it quite far away from Earth or the thing you're orbiting, which means another part of the ellipsis is actually really close, or at least closer to whatever you're orbiting. And now in astronomy, we call those Apo and Peri, respectively. Let's talk about the Earth orbit again that I mentioned. As we go around the sun, as we approach the furthest part of our elliptical orbit away from the sun, because the sun is the heliocentric model, we call it apohelion. Now, as we swing back round and go to the closest part to the sun in our orbit, we then therefore approach perihelion. It all ties in. On Earth, we use the unit G to measure our gravity. Everything is against 1g. So on Earth we have 1g. It makes sense then, if anything was orbiting us, it would get the suffix g. Therefore, the Moon's elliptical orbit, when it approaches the end of its, or its farthest away in its orbit, is called apogee. As it approaches the closest part to Earth in its orbit, it's at perigee. Make sense now? Apo is farthest, peri is closest. Now, you and I are both very familiar with the concept that the moon has phases. In fact, any spherical object up in space is technically going to have a phase. Mercury and Venus have phases. In fact, it was actually our man Galileo back in 1610 using his eyeglass to look at Venus where he discovered Venus had phases. Now, we have lunar phases because, as discussed, Luna, as it's known in Roman mythology, orbits Earth. And as it orbits Earth, it reflects the sun. Now, it reflects the sun. That's important. The moon doesn't generate its own light. It just reflects it from its regolith on the surface. This is important because as the moon orbits around Earth, the part that reflects the sun is only going to be visible at certain times. These are our phases. The 4 phases broken up is the new moon phase, the first quarter, full moon, and the last quarter phase. Now, after a quick crash course in orbital mechanics and about lunar phases, we now know everything we need to answer the question, what is a supermoon? Why do we seem to hate it? As mentioned, in 1979, there was an astrologer called Richard Knoll. He is the one who first used the term supermoon. He used the term to describe the new and the full phases of the moon, but specifically they were used at Peri G. So a supermoon was used to describe a moon, new or full, when it was at Peri G. So remember, that is when the moon was the closest to Earth in its orbit. But I personally have noticed a massive resurgence over the last 5 or so years about the term supermoon. It's almost exclusively now used for the full moon part. And that's because a full moon is visually more striking than the new moon by virtue of, well, being visual. By being visible, you can actually see the full moon. It's big and it's bright and it's shiny. The new moon, not so quite, not so big, not so shiny. So that's why they push the full moon side even more. Funnily enough, Richard Knoll also decided that the coming of the supermoon heralded the coming of natural disasters such as massive inclement weather and earthquakes. So far, he has been incorrect. Now, we are aware that the moon is responsible for the tides on the planet Earth, but as far as we're aware, the moon is not capable of influencing tectonic activity. So, as of yet, a natural occurrence which happens about 4 times every year, a supermoon, is yet to cause a natural disaster. Yet. So, that's all a supermoon is. All a supermoon is a full moon that so happens to fall at the same time as perigee. And in fairness to Richard, I'll give it to him that the term supermoon falls off the tongue a lot better than perigee syzygy moon, which is the actual astronomical term. However, perigee syzygy moon is a lot more fun to say. And if you think I've got my script tucked away in this book, you'll be wrong. In fact, there's our man Kepler. Stunning. As mentioned, I asked the community on Stargazers Lounge. I polled my following on X, as well as asking and polling my following here on YouTube. Now, before we break down the results of my little mini survey here, I want you to consider, what do you think the consensus is going to be about the term supermoon? I asked the question, what are your feelings about the term supermoon and the hype? Note, I didn't ask, what do you think about a supermoon? It was more so about the term, the terminology, and how the media runs away with it, for example. So what do you think the consensus was? Take a moment, let's put into the comments down below. What do you think the overall result was? I'll let you know that my hypothesis going into this was going to be overwhelmingly negative. I thought the entire community, or the vast majority of the community, is going to hate the supermoon, because that's generally what I see when an article goes, supermoon. So let's break this down, shall we? So example here on YouTube, out of 123 votes, 48%, or that's around 34 people, voted that they're indifferent. They don't really care either way. Around 16 people, or 13% of those, said they like supermoon and the hype, which leaves 39% and about 48 people just liking it. Generally in line with what I thought the hypothesis was going to be. My poll over on X didn't get nearly as many results. However, let's be honest, X is a dumpster fire these days, and I will not pay for a blue tick. Out of the 48 respondents then, it broke down like this. 29.2%, or around 14% of people, said they're indifferent, they don't really care. 2 people, 4%, said they like supermoon and the term and the hype. And overwhelmingly, 66% of people, or 32 respondents, said they didn't like it. They disliked the term supermoon and all the media that goes with a supermoon. which now leaves Stargazer's Lounge. Stargazer's Lounge is a forum. I couldn't actually start a post on it, a poll. So what I'm doing is I'm going to look at the comments that they gave me, and I'm going to interpret if they're for, against, or indifferent, okay? Which means, yes, there is an element of me assessing, interpreting these results. Now, I don't think I have a bias either way about this, but of course I would say that. So feel free to take these implied results with a grain of sodium chloride. Let's look into it, shall we? Now, I got 16 responses to my post placed on Stargazer's Lounge. Now, as I sifted through those results and tallied up what I thought they were implying by their results, about 3 of them, or 19% of people, said they were in favor of the term supermoon. They liked the term supermoon. 5% of respondents, about 31%, they're indifferent. They don't care either which way about the term supermoon, which leaves very neatly 50% or 8 respondents saying they dislike it. They don't like the term supermoon. Now, when you look at it, the poll results are actually only half of the equation. They're all good results. However, what I also enjoyed reading was the rationale people were giving behind it. And again, if I take those comments and I interpret them into positive, indifferent, and negative, their comments seem to be in these kind of theme. The theme I seem to get about the negative comments is they dislike the hype and the media using clickbaity articles. They also don't like the fact that the hype can lead to high expectations and embarrass some astronomers. That there's excessive whimsy and romance about a supermoon. And also generally that a supermoon is actually quite a letdown. Out of the indifferent comments, they were kind of along the themes of the moon is the moon. They're not particularly fond of the term supermoon, but they just enjoyed the moon, so they're happy about it. It could also have been that it was a meaningless name. Supermoon's a meaningless name, however, it's otherwise harmless. They don't care too much about the term supermoon, but they just hate the other full names that we get full moons for, such as Sturgeon or Hunter's Moon. Or, quite frankly, it just doesn't bother them. And for those people who had positive feelings about the term supermoon, their comments were along the lines of, well, any media is good media. It gets non-astronomers looking up at the moon and enjoying the moon. It also opens conversations between people who aren't in the hobby or aren't into astronomy, talking to people like us who are in the hobby and enjoy astronomy. And one answer that I actually really enjoyed was things like supermoon and the full moon names are actually ingrained in culture and it's worth talking about them. And I really liked that answer. I really enjoyed that one for some reason. Now, I think the overall majority of people who said they dislike it because of the media hype effectively mean they don't like the nonsense clickbaity headlines, the sensational use of supermoon, and the ridiculous thumbnails. Let's be honest, exaggeration gets people's attention. It's why they will shout, supermoon, once every blah. It's exaggeration. These websites rely on it. They want to get the clicks. These websites, when they publish this article, they push it out and they say, here's a headline. Here's a headline. Oh, the supermoon happens once every year. And that gets a click. And when someone clicks through that link, it basically validates the search engine optimization of that website. They go, oh, look, Google, look how good I am. Look how people are enjoying me, Google. Send more people my way. And once you're on the website, there comes the ads. And we all know, websites do it all the time. They'll get you in and they will put the main meat and potatoes of that article about 4 or 5 paragraphs down. After 4 or 5 in-article adverts, pop-ups, things like that. Subscribe to our newsletter. This is a locked service. Start your free trial now. It's monetization. They do everything they can to extract as much money out of you as they can. Every time they show you an advert, they get a bit of ad revenue. They get a few pennies. It's why these websites do things like 4 paragraphs of nonsense and SEO buzzwords and history that is barely related before you get to the actual paragraph where it says, oh, it'll happen on September 22nd. It's a full moon. It's another reason why YouTubers front load their videos with all this kind of conversation as well to pad out the runtime so they can add mid-roll ads in it, a bit like this. It's nothing new. The only reason we get so bent out of shape out of it is because it's insidious. They're doing it to our hobby, to something we like, and we take that personally. They're sensationalizing it. The media found a term that they can make into a buzzword, the supermoon. And now they add it to everything. We use the term super to blow up articles. We use the term super to make something exaggerated, to say how good something is. It's a good adjective for it. And it gets people's attention. And it works, obviously. And then you get into the astrophotography community, where the vast majority of us, we like to take pictures of deep sky objects. We want to take pictures of those faint nebula, those large nebulous regions, galaxies, things like that. Things that we need dark skies for. The moon lights up the sky, something rotten, really lights it up. And then a supermoon is just even brighter. So I'm not going to speak for every astrophotographer out there, because obviously some people like planets and some people like taking pictures of the moon. However, I would say for the overwhelming majority of us, the full supermoon just gets in the way, and that's why we don't like it. So what's the takeaway here? It seems from the survey I ran, the majority of people are actually quite indifferent about the term supermoon, which goes against what I thought it was going to be. The next closest one in line, of course, is those who don't like the term supermoon. Whether or not they dislike it because it's just a buzzword, or whether or not they dislike it because the media runs with it and tries to make these silly sensational articles about it, which I feel cheapens our companion. The small minority then are actually the people who enjoy the term supermoon. They enjoy the moon, they enjoy the history or the culture behind it, and some people say that you never know, the next protege out there might be some person looking on a cold November at the super beaver moon through their telescope, and they might sit there and go, wow, I really want to learn about that. For example, when I got my first telescope, this little Celestron T70 here for Christmas, guess what the first thing I went out and looked at was? It was the moon. And within 5, maybe 10 minutes, I was immediately already getting my phone against it, trying to figure out how to take a photo of the moon, because I just wanted to share what I was looking at. The moon is our companion. It's there. It's a starting point for so many of us within astronomy and astrophotography and this field in general. It's there. It's an easy thing to start with. I find myself in the indifferent camp, really. Yeah, I don't like the way the media slings the term around like it's something cheap. But they technically have a point. It is a supermoon. It is closer. It radiates back more energy. It's brighter. It's closer. But it's just not as impressive as we think it's going to be, as they make it out to be. And there are some people out there who are interested in astronomy and might just need a little bit of a nudge to go out and look at it. You know, get involved in the hobby, enter astronomy, enter astrophotography, and that's only a good thing. More people get into the hobby, it's always a good thing. And I think it's funny because on one hand we get annoyed by the term supermoon, but we don't get annoyed by the term super apo telescope, because telescopes are sexy. The moon, it has many uses and meanings. There are many people out there who are going to go through their lives barely giving it a second glance. And I kind of find that a bit sad. But, you know, we've all got our own lives to go along with. They've all got their own business. I'm not going to judge them. We can't judge them. There are other people out there who might be going through a rough time and going outside looking at the moon and realizing that, you know, it's something that might bring them comfort or solace or a bit of companionship. It might give them the strength to carry on another day, and that's just looking at the moon. And of course, we're fully aware about how the moon is romanticized in poetry, in stories, in media. The moon is very romanticized. There are people out there who say that they're looking at the moon together, even if they're many miles apart, because they're looking at the same full moon. And that's not all to mention how our ancestors used it for farming, for navigation, for community. It instigated calendar. It's a reason why we have calendar. The moon has been useful. It's always been there as our companion. And then also not to mention how it ushered in the space race and got so many more people interested in astronomy, interested in the moon. It extended the door of science and engineering out to many people of that generation. They got into STEM fields, they got into astrophysics, they got into space exploration because we were racing to who can put their boots down on the moon first. So yeah, it might be annoying when the moon gets called super every now and again. But let's be honest, we would miss it if it was gone. Primarily because we'd either all be dead or living underground. So I think it deserves a little bit of time in the limelight. So many thanks for watching. I'm trying something new here with more astronomy videos as well as the astrophotography side of it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. If you think I could have done better, go ahead, give it that thumbs down and consider subscribing for more videos like this. With all that said, it's just time to say thank you very much for watching. Hope you have clear skies. Keep looking up and keep them cameras clicking. I'll see you later. Whew.